everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
I have yet to be an analyst leader who says, I have enough analysts, right? Even inside of some of the biggest companies in the world that are the most data forward, some of the folks we work with even back on campus, there's no way you can scale enough data analysts to each and every, say, account executive, account manager for some of the most important and valuable services that these mega tech companies will offer. There's just not enough people to keep up with the exponential growth in data. And so the role of the analyst, and the analysts tend to like this quite a bit, is to serve as that bridge to curate the metrics, to curate the views, and then ultimately enable the business to go and self-serve. In some sense, this actually makes the analysts more valuable because it gives them more leverage, right? If I can go and spend 50% of my time getting valuable insights, instead of going and slicing and dicing and hoping I chose the right filters and didn't overlook, a significant trend in my data, that makes me a superhero.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. I'm joined by Dr. Peter Bailis, founder and CEO of Sisu. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Now, Peter, you were an assistant professor of computer science at Stanford. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. I was on the tenure track working on large-scale analytics and having a lot of fun shipping the work that we were doing in the research lab, and made the jump to startup world.
Well, we're going to come back to that in just a second. But when you were there, you also founded the Dawn Project. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. We started Dawn as an inquiry into not how to make ML more accurate, which is what a lot of people were doing at the time, but in terms of how to make it more usable and useful for more people. And the way we ran the lab is we got a bunch of the really cutting edge companies applying AI and ML. So Google and Facebook and Microsoft and VMware. And we really developed a bunch of research in the open around how to make machine learning more usable, and came up with efforts like what's now called ML Perf, which is the first competition not to measure machine learning on accuracy alone, but on speed and on cost. And obviously some of the work also turned into companies like Sisu and also companies like Snorkel.
Amazing. And of course, you mentioned that you were tenure track, and not surprising because you're also a very prolific researcher, and I believe you're still publishing now even. And some of your research and papers have been cited incredibly. I think we looked up no-scope optimizing deep CNN-based queries over video streams at scale to bolt-on casual consistency. And of course, just kind of goes on and on. What are the areas of research or subtopics that really excite you the most?
Yeah, it's a great question. For really the last 40 to 50 decades, depending on how you count it, most of data-intensive computing has been optimized around relational databases, right? So this guy, Ted Cobb, came up with the idea of a relational model, which is tables as we all think of them. And effectively, we've been figuring out how to make them possible to write queries against relational databases, make them really fast. And it's what powers most of modern IT, right? It's transactional information, it's warehousing, it's analytics. My research really focused on this question. In a world where we have a ton more data than ever before, and a ton of often unstructured data like text and video, how do we use ML as a new primitive, not to throw away that relational model, but to really enhance people's day-to-day workflows with this type of large, highly complex data, and integrate ML into conventional data processing tasks by making it faster, by making it cheaper, by making it more usable.
Well, it's interesting. I think all the work that kind of led up to what you're doing today, really, I could see the connective tissues. So with that, tell us a little bit about Sisu, and what exactly is it and how does it help enterprises?
Yeah, it's a great question. Sisu is designed to solve the problem where organizations, they have huge amounts of data collected in the cloud. And simply collecting the data, integrating it, aggregating it, doesn't necessarily mean it gets used. In fact, the tools we have to make use of all of this data, the last mile layer that most people have to access their dashboards, their reports, their querying tools, really haven't changed in the last 20 years even to take advantage of all of this. And so Sisu is effectively a cloud analytics platform that helps organizations take large amounts of data and put that data to work. And what we're really, really good at is going beyond the simple questions. What is going on with revenue? What is going on with engagement? What is going on with customer satisfaction? And using all that data to answer the hardest question, which is, why is revenue changing? Why is engagement changing? And looking at every factor in data to surface the right data to the right people at the right time. So a customer like Gusto is able to take all of the information about their software as a service and spend literally 50% more time getting the insights to the business rather than slicing and dicing and taking a routine process of looking at all this complex data. And that lets this company, and we're a proud Gusto customer ourselves at Sisu, they're fantastic customer support. It lets them be even more effective in the ways that matter and not spend their time on all of the slicing and dicing that finally, with the power of the cloud, we can start to automate via machine learning.
So I think you mentioned the difference between a typical dashboard that's focused on the what to really the more difficult sets of questions that's around why, what are the changing aspects, what are the drivers, and all of this contributes to something you guys call decision gap. And for an enterprise, what are kind of practical challenges that they have when it comes to data, and how are you shoring up or addressing that gap?
When we talk about the decision gap, it really is a very painful problem where organizations will invest substantially in data and their data infrastructure, and they'll move it to the cloud, they'll integrate it, they'll get it all set up, and then they'll expect something to happen. And the gap arises because the decision makers who now have access to all this data lack the tools, processes, and honestly, massive amounts of people required to go and do this using conventional approaches. So Sisu takes a very simple approach. Metrics that matter to a business are defined on an annual basis. And the definition of those metrics in the data might change every quarter. So how we're measuring user engagement, how we're measuring retention, how we're measuring customer satisfaction. And the thesis behind Sisu and how we can close that decision gap is if we can encode the metric and how the metric maps to the data once, as the data continues to arrive in real time, day after day, we can continuously look at the performance of the metric and take every factor attached to every piece of data and go and look for significant changes and bubble up the ones that are truly statistically significant and are most meaningful to each user.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think that's just really powerful is going back to your Dawn project is this notion of really making ML much more usable, efficient, more productive, lower cost, lower use of resources and computational power. And this notion of being able to serve up real time, I mean, that I think, let's say 10 years ago would not have been so easy. So can you talk about kind of the underlying aspects of how is it possible to provide real-time decisions and support?
It's a great question. Historically, and even today in a lot of organizations, you'll sit in something like a weekly business review or quarterly business review. You'll notice a metric is changing and someone wants to know why a metric is changing. Number one thing we actually hear from our customers is the easiest answers they'll say, it's seasonality. We think there's something in the business, we'll explain it away, we'll brush on the rug, but everyone in the room actually knows it's not just seasonality. There's likely something going on. In fact, even in the lab, when I'm working with folks like Microsoft, a metric for, say, Skype engagement, this huge volume of minutes every day, even within that huge volume, if the volume is flat week over week, it's constantly changing. And so the idea was, given the data that's available in the cloud and given the compute that's available in the cloud, if we can provide an engine that can apply these advanced statistical methods, can go test these hypotheses, can go rank them, filter out the noise, then not only can we compute over all of this data, we can take a process that either doesn't happen at all because we brush the questions under the rug, or in the case of really important measures, can take weeks. And we can apply that cloud computing to speed it up and even sometimes do this interactive inside of something like a weekly or quarterly business review.
Now, you mentioned testing every scenario and hypotheses, permutations. So I wonder if you could go a little bit deeper, and also it's testing because it's looking for that statistically significant set of variables, or is it looking just kind of current and historical, or is there also opportunity to simulate forward-looking, prescriptive, and predictive?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a bit of both. And the mental model that we have in terms of really making this decision intelligence actionable is that every result we show a user, they should be able to go and rederive from their own. So for example, real example, looking at supply chain. We're doing a lot with supply chain given what's going on with e-commerce and the continued COVID pandemic. One retailer we work with has 350 different dimensions attached to every package, where it's been sent, what warehouses it's in, what type of package it is, list goes on and on and on. Sisu could tell them down to, say, the warehouse and the package type, or let's say, wooden items being sent in the Southeast, that there's something going on there. And what we would tell a user is, these are the factors that are in some sense causing, and I use that very, very broadly because causality is a huge topic, but these are factors that are highly indicative of incident rate increasing on a relative basis week over week. And instead of just saying that we believe this is the case, we can actually measure using some techniques from statistics what the projected impact of these factors being present in each package will have on the bottom line. So we can attribute, say, 12 basis points of defect rate to this particular population. And so that's effectively combining a search over the possible features of interest, which can literally number in the hundreds of millions or billions, with a projection in some sense of what the lift would be if you were to correct for that particular scenario. And by having that lift calculated, it's very easy then for us to rank. If someone goes and looks at 5 things this week and thinks about their strategy for addressing continued supply chain issues, these are the areas that matter most. And because it's so fast, you can start with those top 5, and you can drill in and continue to ask those questions. And so it really is coupling this hypothesis testing with a projection, and then presenting it to a user who can then go in and even verify, hey, here's all the packages that match this criteria. Hey, here's the exact statistics. It's not a neural network. It's not a black box. I can say, actually, I see that the average here is 5% defect rate. The average overall is a 2% defect rate. This population is, 1% of my overall population. Therefore, I can back out exactly the same calculations Sisu ultimately told me.
I'm actually really excited. And the reason I'm excited is I think for several years, I think at the enterprise level, they've been talking about decision support, real-time decision support. But the reality is, I think on the ground, even the more sophisticated companies, is that they look very much kind of historically. They look at kind of month to month, maybe quarter to quarter, and adjust accordingly. But really, it's very much kind of looking at the rear view mirror. This is an opportunity where, as it's happening, you can recalibrate and make sure that you're profit maximizing or optimizing for whatever, that the set of KPIs or metrics are. That's really interesting and very exciting, because ultimately enterprises, even though what they say and what they do are completely different, is that they're typically driven by Hippo. You mentioned seasonality, but some senior VP or some executive says we need to do this. That's based on experience, gut, intuition, you name it. But here you're getting down to real deep science that you can't refute. And the fact that it's ranked, you can make it very clear in terms of your choices and the causality, but also the expected lift or results. So it really makes business decisions a science, whereas before it was very much guessworking or scapegoating for that matter.
And I think just to give credit where credit's due, this is only enabled by the last 5 years of cloud data adoption. So to build a company like Sisu or have a product like Sisu in market, even in 2015, you spend all of your time integrating this data, setting up the data feeds, bringing it together, dealing with DBAs. With things like Snowflake and Databricks and BigQuery and Redshift and these cloud-based data storage systems, the data is finally there. And what's been missing is this correct application of high dimensional statistics and modeling at cloud scale. And that was ultimately why I decided to leave academia. Was it's not just a stats and a computational problem. It's bringing this into that ecosystem and then empowering a human in the loop to go and check all of that, battle hardened gut intuition against what the data is actually saying, so that they can make the best decision.
I mean, in a nutshell, you basically explained the core IP, which is very exciting. Now, when we think about something like this, and for those that are listening, I think their natural kind of reaction is, gosh, now my staff or myself would have to learn data science, and this is going to be complex. But from a user experience, it's not necessarily the case, right? They can simply make changes using filters to find every possible permutations and get the kind of testing results that they're looking for. Can you kind of give us a little bit more detail?
Exactly. So the idea behind Sisu, and part of the bridge between the business analyst or the business user and the data, is that metric definition. And so there is a step where, let's say you want to model lifetime value of a customer. There's someone on a data team who's defined that and has the right tables and so on. And we can either import that from a data engineering team's tool, or we can help our customers define that on their own. Once that's done, which is typically done in SQL, which is the common language of these structured cloud warehouses, there's no more code. And we've effectively taken the common patterns that apply across industries and best practices around understanding and diagnosing changes in metrics and made it all UI based. And so once that metric is set up and I care about, say, month over month change, as new data arrives, we can continuously process. We can set up alerts for users to understand when there's a significant change and why the change occurred. And maybe one of the favorite features from the business perspective, often you show up to weekly business reviews are like the, kind of bread and butter of where Sisu fits in, because that's often when people are asking why. So instead of just looking at a chart and looking at a line and saying it's flat or it's down or otherwise, often analysts will spend, in some cases, days preparing for these meetings. They'll show up with what's called like a waterfall chart. So what's the previous period? What's the current period? What are the set of factors that contributed positively, negatively, and so on? With Sisu, one interface that our users love is we'll build the waterfall chart dynamically based on the latest data and the factors that are impacting that metric. And so no matter what's gone on, today, yesterday, so on, if there's a change overnight as we're preparing for the weekly dispute, Sisu can have that result ready. And that waterfall chart, as with any kind of drill downs or continued exploration, it's all no code. And so that getting the metric right is the critical step. And then everything else is effectively accessible to a data savvy or highly motivated, business owner.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it's almost like a business analyst or data analyst, rather than having to spend those hours or days preparing for that granular report, they can actually have this all at their fingertips. And really what they're spending time is verification of kind of what is surfacing up and making sure that all the details underneath line up. So when they're presenting with confidence. I wonder, is that helping the analyst, or at some point are we minimizing the role of the analyst?
It's a great question, and one that we hear quite a bit from analysts when they first see Sisu, right? What is my role going to be in this future of decision intelligence? And the reality is, I have yet to be an analyst leader who says, I have enough analysts, right? Even inside of some of the biggest companies in the world that are the most data forward, some of the folks we work with even back on campus, there's no way you can scale enough data analysts to each and every, say, account executive, account manager for some of the most important and valuable services that these mega tech companies will offer. No less if I'm someone in an e-commerce setting or retail or supply, there's just not enough people to keep up with the exponential growth in data. And so the role of the analyst, and the analysts tend to like this quite a bit, is to serve as that bridge to curate the metrics, to curate the views, and then ultimately enable the business to go and self-serve. So I can embed, say, that waterfall chart inside of a report that my business team can go and look at. And only then, if they have a question, if they can't self-serve and configure these filters and drill in on their own, then I go and get pinged. And in some sense, this actually makes the analysts more valuable because it gives them more leverage, right? If I can go and spend 50% of my time getting valuable insights instead of going and slicing and dicing and hoping I chose the right filters and didn't overlook, a significant trend in my data, that makes me a superhero and actually makes me the hero inside of my business, as opposed to a service org that's constantly being buried by requests. And at some point, people stop asking questions.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Can you give us some live, maybe case studies of how other companies have implemented this in terms of both how quickly they can get up and running, what's the kind of payback period, and what are some of the revenue lift or cost savings that they've seen as a result of these real-time decision making? Yeah,
it's a great question. So we have a range of kind of public case studies. I talked a little about Gusto and their ability to go and leverage all of their customer data, get 50% more time going and actually, delivering useful insights. We talked a little bit publicly with them around during, say, PPP crisis, trying to understand at the start of COVID who would most benefit from PPP outreach, given that Gusto serves such a small business community. And actually, it was interesting where, when everything is changing, right, being able to highlight who is in need most made a big difference in terms of their strategy on that. We work with a company called Roman Health. So they're a subscription healthcare company. They have literally millions of data points, and their team is daily using Sisu to go and understand how their subscription base is changing and how that's impacting critical metrics like customer satisfaction all the way to retention. And the thesis is this, right, from a get started perspective. All of these companies have made an investment in cloud data. So again, they've invested in BigQuery or Snowflake or Redshift. And what we do is we come in and we understand a company's metrics. Say someone comes in and says, I want to try Sisu. We will sit down with them and understand what do they do today in terms of their slicing and dicing. What does that data set look like? And provided it has a sufficient granularity and is refreshing and has the right dimensions, right? If you just have sales by product by day, it's not going to be very interesting to use Sisu. But that is, decreasing the case with most of our customers. We can POC in an afternoon because we're connecting the same data or take an extract of that data, and then they run it through Sisu. And we can't promise needle in a haystack insights in the sense that it's someone else's business and it's their data. But we can promise, and what we are incredibly successful with, is that we can offer a speed and comprehensiveness that's unparalleled. You can get it's almost unfair to compare the speed at which you can accelerate these diagnostic tasks because you're pitting, the power of the cloud versus someone manually configuring filters inside of a dashboard. It's 100 plus times faster. And then the business impact is ultimately in that analyst team and the data team's ability to then go and influence the business, to go change strategy, go change pricing, so on. And so we are very successful with companies that have made that move to the cloud and are looking to do more with that they feel the pain of that decision gap. And that's why we're able to work with a range of companies from the tech company, Udacity, Gusto, Roman Health, all the way to the kind of MasterCard, Wayfair, big companies of the world as well, who are on that cutting edge of data.
Speaking of cutting edge, I think one of the things that I think both yourself relative to your organization is so unique is that many companies, of course, they're trying to productionalize and scale and have certain, SLAs and rigor to support large enterprises. But because of your background, you not only know the kind of product extensions or product feature set that needs to be built out, but you have a much longer horizon in terms of where things are going on a kind of more seismic level from a data and an analytics movement. So that gives you a kind of a horizon advantage that maybe vis-a-vis your competitive set may not even know, because you truly are at the cutting edge, and I'm sure you maintain your colleagues and your other research network. How does that research with what is needed today for production purposes, how do they kind of meld in to make sure that you guys stay way ahead of competition? And what are some of those things that you guys are working on near horizon that you can share, but also maybe a more kind of philosophically that you can share more longer term that is not confidential?
My thesis, after seeing AI ML have such an impact in many industries and still have a lot of promise in many others, is that tangibly delivering value quickly is the best way to show that there's a better way to work with your data. And so in our go-to-market motion, in our product, in our user experience, it is optimized to show rather than tell. And what we tell prospects when they ask for a demo, at the end of the demo, I say, I can tell you demos, I can give you case studies, I can do all this all day. Let us get your data into Sisu and we'll show you. And I think that is emblematic of our approach and strategy as a company, in that if we can show value on people's existing data and earn the right to expand use cases and users, that's stronger than any cool slogan, tagline, branding that we can go and do, because we can back up the claims with rigorous, computer science, statistics, and systems at scale. And that is critical for us in the market, where if you Google data insights, you're going to have just the longest list of companies claiming to do this, that, and the other thing. And also a lot of, from the consumer side, a lot of skepticism. And we've decided from a company strategy to be the best in the world at finding out why things are changing, to do it quickly, to do it comprehensively, and be able to show that time to value. Where this goes from here is pretty broad and pretty expansive. I mean, I like to think about Sisu as having a 30-year roadmap to go and make sure we can get the right data to the right people at the right time, which requires more than just the why. It's what's going on now, what anomalies and trends are happening. It's why are things changing? Tell me the causes and the influences and the lift. Help me figure out what to do about it. So predictions, forecasting, scenario planning. The reason I'm so bullish on Sisu is that each of these questions unlocks massive business value. And to go and execute well on this, you have to do two things incredibly well. One is you have to understand what is possible given the limits of modern computer science. Everyone wants a self-driving marketing department. Probably not going to happen in my lifetime. But can we go and help people in their day-to-day decision-making understand the impact of increasing spend in one channel versus the other? Absolutely. So we know what is possible, and we're not going to overclaim in terms of our capabilities. And we'll continue to iterate and innovate on that edge, but really be able to back it up. And the second part is just critical, is making it consumable, right? This isn't, AI as a service backed by either an API or a professional services team that's just building models, custom for each user. It's a platform that is designed to be integrated with people's day-to-day work in the places that they want to do their work. So embedding this inside of their dashboards and reports, going to consume this via email, eventually Slack. And the way we kind of go from here is we have this very defensible, very unique, differentiated why. And over time, it becomes a matter of, essentially opening up more and more of these common data analysis questions and making them accessible to more people within a given company. And I don't see that stopping, really ever. And what's so exciting from a long-term perspective is the amount of data inside of private enterprises, more than we've ever seen in the history of humanity. It's insane what granularity of data is inside of a commercial data warehouse that will never be monetized, never be shared, not be sold to advertisers. It's not like consumer internet, but that companies can start to use to make better decisions. And that potential and that data is only get bigger and bigger over time.
Those out there that are claiming certain capabilities, I think what you guys are doing is starting to kind of strip away the premium. When I think about professional services and companies that are primarily services oriented, you're starting to strip that away and not exactly commoditize it, but certainly lower the cost and make it more readily available to a larger group of people. So I think that's very exciting. The last question for you is lessons learned. Any type of project or product failure, and any kind of lessons they can share with the listeners.
One of the reasons why I left academia was that in academia, there's very much a winner take all mentality around project development, right? It's great to collaborate. I have a number of fantastic collaborators as a faculty member that I continue to collaborate with, but often it's who's the lead author on the paper, which student gets the credit, what's the dissertation going to be? And there's a lot of value in that. There's a reason for that, but I have loved, as part of the company, building a team of people. And truly, I think the people we've brought on to date and continue to bring on are the best part of the company, especially for a company which, as we've talked about, you say we have this deep computer science background. Completely agree. But the reason why we win as a company is we bring together people who probably, to be totally honest, would not organically get together. So we have some hardcore computer science and statistics. We have great product design and product engineering. We also have a go-to-market team, right, who goes and can evangelize and read the market and come up with the right way to position and message and really help tell the world there's a different way to think about their data and to use all of this. And I often find that you can get a great go-to-market team to sell a lot of enterprise software. You can get a lot of computer science folks to go build some cool tech, but getting that end to end and all the way to the customer in a way that still respects the fundamental computer science and the fundamental limitations and capabilities of cloud native machine learning, that's been amazing. And as we've obviously brought in more and more people, there's this, very clear preferential attachment, right? Great people want to work with other great people. And I think that bringing people together under a common vision of what the future can be is incredibly exciting. It's very challenging, right? Especially as each step we take, we learn more about the market and learn more about capabilities and learn more about what users want. But I'd say it's the most rewarding, gratifying part. One of my mentors had told me that this was in their transition from academia, that this was one of the most meaningful parts. But I think that idea of kind of winning together and bringing these different skill sets together, I've certainly gotten my, I don't know how you count it, second or third education in this role to date. And I'm really just proud of the team that we have built and continue to build. That's maybe my favorite part as well of this journey.
Makes sense. Understood. Well, with that, I've been joined by Dr. Peter Bailis, CEO of Sisu. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks so much.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.